Thank you so much. Because this is my first online conference, I was unable to enable my own slides. So Justin is kindly going to do that. So I will signal him by saying slide 1, slide 2, etc. So those will be little interjections. This study builds on Gwyn Kessler's study of rabbinic reproductive theology in Leviticus Rabbah. Her volume was Conceiving Israel, published in 2009. Thank you, Gwyn, for attending this conference. This project explores the significance of male reproductive fluid in classical rabbinic sources. The research is part of a study on the representation of gender in the Sang of Akabya ben Mahalalel, Mishnah Avot 3.1, in the Mishnah Avot volume of the Feminist Commentary on the Babylonian Talmud series, edited by Professor Tali Lan, whom I also thank for attending. The goal of this series is to isolate and analyze the ideological representation and halakhic issues involving gender in classical rabbinic literature and culture. Mishnah Avot 3.1 assumes a death in life practical theology, slide 2, admonishing one to avoid sin by intensive reflection on the contrast between the inherently physical mortal nature of human life and the infinite sovereignty and, by implication, acorporality of the divine judge. Akabya ben Mahalalel said, reflect on 3 things and you will not fall into the hands of sin. Know, from whence have you come, and whither are you going, and before whom will you be judged in future reckoning? From whence have you come? From a fet tipas rucha, whither to a place of dust, maggots, worms, and maggots, and before whom you will be judged in future reckoning? Before the King of Kings, the Blessed Holy One. This sang obviously engages issues of gender representation, and that the individual who is admonished is a male self, and the first object of contemplation, the fetid drop, is a male bodily fluid. Thus, the metonym for the origins of human life is explicitly male, with no reference to the womb as the source of life, despite the very many biblical antecedents. This paper will focus on the semantic usage of the drop, tipa, the conceptual drop of semen, which appears as a metonym for the agency of male reproduction in various systems of meaning, theological, moral, and as a marker of ethnic identity or legal status. My findings confirm and extend Kessler's conclusions that human reproduction is overwhelmingly represented in classical rabbinic sources as the work of the male seed and largely ignores the female role in conception and prenatal nurture. Also confirmed is Kessler's observation that by contrast with the Greco-Roman evidence, rabbinic sources are far less interested in the biology of reproduction than in its moral, ideological, and theological significance. Part 1, the semantics of the drop. The word drop is opposed to seminal emission, tipa, shichvat zera. In the pre-medieval rabbinic corpus, drop as a metonym for the procreative power of semen is almost always embedded in a broad moral, theological, or halachic economy of meaning. To my knowledge, it is never associated with ritual impurity and is used very rarely to designate a strictly biological fact related to conception. One example of this is in the Bavli, Yevamot 98a, that twins result from the splitting of one seminal drop rather than from a woman conceiving twice. By contrast, the term seminal emission, shichvat zera, in pre-medieval contexts, is largely associated with halachic discussions relating to ritual purity and impurity, which is natural considering the biblical antecedents in Leviticus 15. Like the usage of the term drop, seminal emission is used extremely rarely to denote strictly biological data, and I could only find 3 unambiguous examples of this usage. For instance, B. Bacharot 44b, probably discussing animals here rather than humans, notes an anatomical description of separate conduits for urine and seminal emission. There's a couple others as well, but I will skip them. Only a few classical rabbinic references to seminal emission associate the term with theological or theological valence, and those that do always impute a negative one. For instance, following biblical antecedents in Leviticus 19:20, forbidden sexual relations between a man and his betrothed female slave, and Numbers 5:13, the sota, the term seminal emission denotes an illicit sexual act between a man or a woman with ritual consequences, translated as carnal relations in the JPS Bible. Other examples are the admonitions against seminal emission with no reproductive purpose, Shichvat Zera Livtala in Masechet Kala and Kala Rabati. 2, drop is a term for male seed. Kessler has noted the fact that in Leviticus Rabbah, reproductive semen is always referred to as a drop or white drop rather than seed, zera. I've expanded the parameters of this usage of the term drop to include all classical rabbinic literature. A review of this data not only confirms Kessler's observation, but extends it, suggesting a unique valorization of semen when indicated by the term drop. Except for usage in Leviticus Rabbah, which we'll talk about below, the drop of whiteness and the drop of filth, when the word appears in isolation without another noun in the construct state, with or without the preposition shall, it almost always means the procreative drop of semen that has sparked a human life. Slide 3. If a drop of another liquid substance is intended, most often another noun is added to identify its precise substance. For example, a drop of libation wine, tipa shel yayin nesech, a drop of wine, tipa shel secher, a drop of oil, tipa shel semen. You can peruse the list yourselves. By contrast, apart from the construct phrases in Leviticus Rabbah, which we'll talk about in a bit, I was only able to find 2 instances of the corresponding drop of semen, shel zera, tipat zera, and these appear only in later medieval sources. 3, the power of the drop is God's tool in procreation. Kessler concluded that in Leviticus Rabbah, the drop of semen is a necessary tool for conception, yet God is always its ultimate cause. In my view, the fact that in the classical rabbinic corpus, the unqualified drop, tipa, always signifies the conceiving drop of male semen implies an inherent power and agency as the origin of human life. For example, although an ultimate role in creation is attributed to God, a tradition in Leviticus Rabbah 14 stresses the power of the drop to generate the multicellular human form. In a passage in which David interprets Psalms 51:7, in sin my mother conceived me, a shift is made from the mother of the verse to the male drop as the agent of conception. Quote, you inserted every single drop of semen that was in him, Jesse, end of quote. Furthermore, here God is compared to a man who sows a field, but at the time of the harvest yields differentiated crops of straw, hay, and grain. Here, the white seed of semen alone of all human bodily substances has the ability to become differentiated into soft tissue, moach, bones, and sinews. A Bavli tradition also presents a strong sense of incipient human becoming, here moral rather than physical, inherent in the drop. That angel appointed over pregnancy, Lila is its name, takes up the drop and stands it up before the Holy Blessed One and says before him, Master of the universe, what will this drop become? A hero or a weakling, a wise man or a fool, a rich man or a poor man? This is in the Bavli, Nida 16b. 4, the drop is determinant of human status and identity. The use of the term drop to indicate identity and or halachic status suggests it has a unique role in the formation, physical and moral, of human beings. For instance, in the Bavli, the terms the kosher drop and the invalid drop are legal designations for individuals permitted and forbidden to marry into the priesthood. Similarly, the drop of the firstborn and the drop of the non-firstborn distinguish between male individuals of different status. The mamzer and the natin are distinguished by categories derived from their seminal origins. Quote, the mamzer comes from a kosher drop and the natin comes from an invalid drop, end of quote, B Horeot 13a. Similarly, a mamzer and a convert in Bavli 6b with parallels. Strikingly, the appeal to the male drop as having the agency to confer identity contradicts the matrilineal principles in rabbinic law. For the halachic status of mamzer, firstborn, and ethnicity are in different ways determined by the mother, not the father. These examples offer further support for Kessler's assertion that rabbinic discourses of procreation valorize male seed and diminish the role of the mother in human reproduction. A term that is closely connected with the white or fetid drop is used as a derogatory designation for high-status Gentile individuals, the fetid secretion, lecha srucha. In contradistinction with the fetid drop, this term is used as a metonym for the morally inferior essential nature of high-born non-Jews. For instance, The anonymous Roman wife of Turnus Rufus, the future wife of Rabbi Akiva, after conversion, according to the Agadic tradition, comes from a fetid secretion, lechas rucha, in Bavli Avodah Zarah 20a. Likewise, the term is used to describe King Achashverosh and the rulers responsible for the destruction of the temples, Nebuchadnezzar and Titus, as well as Pharaoh and, of all people, Shechem in Genesis. 5, the drop is determinant of moral character. A few early rabbinic sources impute a positive moral valence connected with the drop of conception. For instance, in Bereshit Rabbah Vilna edition, Isaac is said to come from a holy drop since he was conceived after Abraham's circumcision. In the same text, a repeated tradition witnesses the fact that Jacob conceived Reuben with his first drop, perhaps reflecting positively on Jacob's moral character and sexual self-control. By contrast, a negative moral valence is associated with the first drop in Avot Rabbi Natan A. The first drop that a man puts into a woman is the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. By contrast with the other passages, however, the sexual act in Avot Rabbi Natan A is not specified as an act of procreation, perhaps hence the association with the Yetzer Hara. 6, the drop of whiteness, Tipasha Lavnut or Levinut, and the fetid drop, Tipas Rucha. These two phrases figure in two distinct theological economies of the relationship between human and God. The first is the miraculous nature of human conception, articulated in Leviticus Rabbah 14. In two traditions, much discussed by Kessler, God manipulates the drop of whiteness in order to create the human embryo. Kessler's detailed analysis has revealed how these traditions render invisible the role of the mother. Significantly, however, a third tradition may have been misread by Kessler, in part owing to the reading prioritized in Margaliot's critical editions. Slide 4. A parable in Leviticus Rabbah 14:2 describes the miracle of conception and the birth of a child. Rabbi Levi said, in the way of a world, a man entrusts an object of silver in secret with his friend, and the friend returns a measure of gold in public view. So too, the Holy Blessed One entrusts to human beings a drop of whiteness or filth in secret and returns to them beautiful, whole and souled living beings in public view. Is this not praise? The term that Kessler has read as whiteness has significantly different orthography than its other two occurrences in Leviticus Rabbah. Shel banit, as opposed to shel lavnut. That is, the other two occurrences, it's very clear it means whiteness. The critical apparatus evidences an unusual number of variant readings, showing that copyists had difficulty understanding the word. As it stands, the word has no obvious meaning. One of the variants is lichluchet, dirt or filth, which I venture is a possible reading. In this case, the lowly physical matter of the drop that is entrusted into the human body is contrasted with the final product, the beautiful, whole human beings, which is a greater contrast than silver and gold. If read thus, the parable implies the presence of the second theological economy, that of the fetid drop of Mishnah Avot 3:1. Here, God's role as ultimate transcendent judge is contrasted with inherent human mortality by projecting inevitable future death back to the moment of conception. The goal of this contrast is practical. It constitutes an object of meditation to avoid sin. The reader here is admonished to reflect on the reality of unavoidable inherent human mortality through imaginative engagement with two images that are beyond human consciousness and experience, conception and post-mortem corporeal putrefaction. Since the root, sarach, predominantly means stink or repulsive or disgusting in modern Hebrew, it's natural to understand this mortal drop as a stinking drop. But I have found, after an exhaustive overview of the rabbinic usage of the Hebrew verbal root, sarach, that the verb almost never appears in rabbinic Hebrew with these meanings. Although the usage changes in the medieval period, the predominant semantic range of the verb sarach in classical rabbinic sources is 1, unfit for human consumption, for foodstuffs, 2, rotten or putrescent, for food and human and animal corpses and bodily tissue, and 3, in Agadic sources only, morally deficient. A vast range of inappropriate moral behaviors are designated sruchim. Like the word drop as a designation of semen, tipas srucha is never associated with ritual impurity. Given Mishnah Avot 3:1's evocation of dust worms and maggots, I believe the best sense here is rotten or putrescent rather than smelly or disgusting. The intention of the saying is to communicate the inherent mortal destiny of the human body, even at the moment of conception. Although the verb sarach can mean morally deficient or sinful in the Gaga tradition, I do not think that is the intention here. There's no evidence in the saying itself and in its subsequent interpretation in traditional sources to read it as a reflection of some kind of original sin inherent in conception. It is eventual death and putrefaction that is inevitable, dust, worms, and maggots. Thus, the image fetid drop denotes the inherent mortality of human life from the conceptual moment, rather than any negative olfactory or repulsive qualities of semen. 7, gendered representation of human mortality, the rabbinic afterlife of Mishnah Avot 3.1. Trajectories of interpretation of Mishnah Avot 3.1 and the phrases a fetid drop or fetid secretion in classical and medieval rabbinic texts show an eclectic assortment of interpretations in which different texts show distinctive propensities regarding gendered content. Some rabbinic trajectories of interpretation diminish the focus on the male body assumed by Mishnah Avot 3.1. For instance, a theologically charged tradition in Leviticus Rabbah 18.1, with parallels in Ecclesiastes Rabbah and Tanhuma Buber, slide 5, references are saying in the context of commentary on Ecclesiastes 12.2. Rabbi Joshua ben Levi said, Rabbi Akiva or Akabia, there's a variance in the manuscripts, interpreted all three things from this verse. Remember your creator, Zachoret Borecha. Your creator, your source, your well, Be'ercha, a moist secretion. Your pit, Borcha, this is worms and maggots. Your creator, Boreh, this is the Holy One, blessed be he, before whom you will receive reckoning and judgment. Okay, so obviously there's a pun going on here on the word, the verbal root bara. In an intertextual, midrashic sort of strategy, traditions of two distinct genres are interrelated here. So they not only communicate the same message about human mortality and ultimate divine judgment, but also interact in a clever way as commentary on the scriptural verse from Ecclesiastes. This trajectory of interpretation diminishes the reproductive power inherent in the male drop by rendering it but a moist secretion, lecha srucha, the term used elsewhere to mark ignoble Gentile origins. 3 recensions of Avot Rabbi Natan are especially noteworthy as far as gender representation is concerned, since 2 of them evidence an explicit enhancement of the role of women in human procreation. Avot Rabbi Natan A, the received recension, lacks any references to women. Its commentary shifts the saying's ideological frame from human mortality to ritual impurity and disgust through the addition of a parable about the inherent repulsive nature of the human body, slide 6, presumed to be male owing to the lack of reference to menstruation. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said, let me illustrate with a parable. To what maybe this be compared? To a king who built a palace and decorated it, yet a tannery pipe passed through it and emptied at its entrance. So this tannery pipe are the human parts of the human body that emit the very end streams of foulness from the bowels. The recension designated Avot Rabbi Natan B also shifts the frame to ritual impurity, but significantly it does so through the explicit attribution of the source of human life to the female womb in a sustained comparison between the womb and the grave. Slide 7. So here are 4 places. There's the questions from the Sang of Akabia ben Mahalalel. From where did he come? From a place of fire. The place of fire is the womb, the compressed place is the womb, a place no creature can see is the womb, and the womb is ritually contaminating. Granted, the equation between the female womb and death projects a negative view of female reproductive functions. Yet, Avot Rabbi Natan B lacks any reference to male powers of reproduction. A very different kind of impulse is evident in the Avot Rabbi Natan A manuscript Vatican 44, an appendix in Schechter's critical edition. Although this recension is medieval, I've included it owing to its unique impulse towards gender complementarity. References to women, their role in reproduction, and their life experience have been included in the commentary. First, the origin of inherent human mortality is called the world of the womb, rechem. Second, the humility learned from contemplating one's fleshly nature is called the impurity of the womb, rechem. Third, the commentary on fetid drop includes the three partners conception theory in Bavli Nida 31a, showing the mother, the father, and God to contribute in different ways to the development of the fetus. Perhaps most tellingly, a woman mourning a child is used as an ideal type to represent the sorrow of inherent human mortality. The next slide, please. Rabbi Zaira said, when a decree of death is declared, a mother groans at the death of her child. And there is also a saying about what the father does, showing the gender complementarity. Clearly, Vatican 44 is far removed from the classical rabbinic corpus. Its generic characteristics, its sentimental homiletical tone, and perhaps its intended audience, yet its insertion of explicit references to women's role in reproduction and experience of human mortality are noteworthy. Conclusions and further research. This paper affirms the importance of the methodological step, a very tedious one, of careful attention and cross-check to semantic change over time by using the databases. The precise meaning of the verb sarach frames its appearance in the phrase fetid drop in Mishnah 3.1 as a marker of the theological economy of inherent human mortality rather than impurity and sensory disgust. Although this could not be discussed in detail here, following the development of the terminology and interpretations of Mishnah 3.1 from classical to later rabbinic sources, evidence is a shift owing to the way in which the meaning of the word changed over time and its shifting frames of meaning. The appearance of detail concerning women and gender vary in different texts. Apart from evidence of possible censorship in Avot to Rabbi Natan A, which I've written about elsewhere, I can at present detect no pattern. A closer look at Vatican 44 and later commentaries is recommended as the next step towards such a determination.